Keir Starmer just got caught in a lie so blatant, so undeniable that the entire House of Commons erupted in chaos. This happened minutes ago during Prime Minister's questions, and the footage is already spreading like wildfire across social media. A Reform UK MEP stood up, armed with documents, armed with evidence, and systematically destroyed every claim Starmer had just made. And here's the thing, Starmer knew he was lying. You could see it in his face, the stammering, the deflection, the desperate attempts to change the subject. But the Reform MP wouldn't let it go. They kept pushing, kept presenting facts, kept forcing Starmer to either admit he lied or dig himself deeper. And Starmer chose to dig deeper. He doubled down on claims that were provably false. In front of cameras, in front of Parliament, in front of the entire nation. This isn't a minor discrepancy. This isn't a politician spinning the truth. This is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom being caught in a direct, explicit lie about a matter of national importance. And the fallout from this moment could end his premiership. Let's go through exactly what happened step by step, because the details matter enormously. Prime Minister's questions started normally enough. Starmer faced questions about the economy, about healthcare, about immigration. He gave his usual answers, carefully worded, heavily scripted, designed to sound reassuring without actually committing to anything specific. But then a Reform UK MP, Lee Anderson, stood up, and the atmosphere in the chamber changed immediately. Anderson didn't ask a question. He made a statement. He said that Starmer had repeatedly claimed that unemployment had fallen since Labour took office. He said Starmer had used these statistics in interviews, in speeches, in previous parliamentary debates, and then Anderson dropped the bombshell. He pulled out official figures from the Office for National Statistics, the government's own data, and read them aloud. Unemployment hadn't fallen. It had risen significantly. The numbers Starmer had been citing were simply false. The chamber went silent. Every MP from every party knew what this meant. Being wrong about statistics is one thing. Politicians get figures mixed up all the time. But Starmer hadn't just mentioned these numbers once in passing. He'd built entire arguments around them. He'd used them to claim Labour's economic policies were working. He'd attacked Conservative MPs by comparing his supposed success on unemployment to their record. He'd done this repeatedly, confidently, as if the facts were beyond dispute. And now, with the actual government data being read into the parliamentary record, it was clear that Starmer had either been catastrophically misinformed by his team or had knowingly cited false statistics. Neither explanation is good, but one is career-ending. Starmer's response told you everything you needed to know. He didn't deny the figures Anderson had just read out. He couldn't, because they were official government statistics that anyone could verify. Instead, he tried to deflect. He claimed he'd been talking about a different measure of unemployment. He suggested Anderson was cherry-picking data. He attacked Reform UK's economic policies to change the subject. But Anderson wasn't having it. He stood back up, waved the ONS report and said, "These are your government's own figures, Prime Minister. Are you saying the Office for National Statistics is lying? Or are you admitting you've been misleading Parliament and the public?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. What Starmer did next was remarkable for all the wrong reasons. Rather than admitting error, rather than saying he'd been given incorrect information and would correct the record, he attacked Anderson personally. He questioned Anderson's understanding of economic data. He suggested Reform UK was trying to play politics with employment figures. He said his government's record on jobs spoke for itself. But here's the problem with that response. It's on record. Every word Starmer has said about unemployment is recorded, either in Hansard or on video. And journalists, researchers and political opponents are right now going through every instance where Starmer cited falling unemployment. They're comparing what he said to what the actual data shows. And the evidence is damning. Starmer didn't make a one-time mistake. He repeatedly, consistently used false unemployment figures to support his arguments. The opposition benches erupted. Conservative MPs were shouting, "Resign" and "Liar." Reform UK members were on their feet, demanding Starmer correct the record. Even some Labour backbenchers looked uncomfortable, realising that their Prime Minister had just been caught in something that couldn't be easily explained away. The Speaker had to call for order multiple times, his voice barely audible over the chaos. This wasn't normal parliamentary theatre. This was genuine outrage, genuine shock that a Prime Minister would so brazenly misrepresent official statistics and then double down when confronted with the truth. The implications of this moment are staggering. In the British parliamentary system, misleading Parliament is one of the most serious offences a politician can commit. It's supposed to be a resignation matter. Ministers have lost their jobs for far less egregious examples of providing incorrect information to Parliament. But Starmer isn't just any minister. He's the Prime Minister. And the convention is that if a Prime Minister deliberately misleads Parliament on a significant matter, they should resign. Now, whether Starmer will actually resign is another question entirely. Political conventions only work if people follow them, and Starmer has shown a remarkable ability to ignore conventions when they're inconvenient for him. But the pressure on him to step down is going to be immense. Within minutes of PMQs ending, the story was everywhere. News websites led with it. Political journalists were calling it the most damaging moment of Starmer's premiership. Social media was flooded with clips of the exchange, with Anderson's accusation and Starmer's floundering response being watched millions of times. The hashtag Starmer lied was trending within half an hour. This isn't a story that's going to fade away over the weekend. This is going to dominate the news cycle for days, possibly weeks. And every day it continues. Every day Starmer is forced to answer questions about why he misled Parliament. His authority erodes a little bit more. The Conservative Party has already announced they're submitting a formal complaint to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards. They're demanding a full investigation into whether Starmer knowingly misled Parliament. If the Commissioner finds that he did, the consequences could be severe. Starmer could be forced to apologise formally to the House. He could be suspended. In the worst case, if it's determined that he deliberately and repeatedly lied about matters of national importance, the calls for his resignation would become impossible to ignore. His own party might force him out just to stop the bleeding, to end a scandal that's making Labour look dishonest and incompetent. Reform UK is absolutely capitalising on this moment. Nigel Farage has already given a statement calling Starmer the most dishonest Prime Minister in modern British history. Reform MPs are flooding social media with posts highlighting the discrepancy between what Starmer claimed and what the data actually shows. They're framing this as proof that Labour will say anything to stay in power, that they can't be trusted on the economy or anything else. And the brutal truth is, it's working. Reform support has been growing steadily, and moments like this accelerate that growth. When the Prime Minister gets caught lying on live television, voters who were already sceptical about mainstream politics become even more cynical, and parties like Reform benefit enormously. The media reaction has been swift and brutal. Even outlets that typically support Labour are struggling to defend Starmer on this one. The Guardian published an editorial calling his response inadequate and concerning. The BBC's political editor did a breakdown showing multiple instances where Starmer used the incorrect unemployment figures. Sky News ran a fact-check segment that concluded Starmer's claims were misleading at best, false at worst. When you've lost the media outlets that want to give you the benefit of the doubt, you know you're in serious trouble. The right-wing press is having an absolute field day with headlines like "Liar in Chief" and Starmer's statistics scandal. The Daily Mail has already published a list of other claims Starmer has made that they're now questioning, suggesting this might be part of a pattern rather than an isolated incident. Political analysts are comparing this to previous scandals that brought down government ministers. They're citing cases where MPS resigned over far smaller misrepresentations. The precedent is clear. Misleading Parliament is supposed to end careers. But there's a big difference between a junior minister being forced out and a Prime Minister with a large majority deciding to tough it out. Starmer has the numbers in Parliament to survive a confidence vote. If it came to that, his MPs might be uncomfortable, they might be embarrassed, but very few of them want to trigger a leadership contest that could plunge Labour into chaos. So Starmer is gambling that he can weather this storm, that eventually another story will dominate the headlines, that voters will move on. Labour MPs are in panic mode right now. Their WhatsApp groups are exploding with messages. Some are defending Starmer, arguing this is a media overreaction to a simple mistake. Others are furious, questioning how this was allowed to happen, demanding answers about who gave Starmer the incorrect figures and why nobody caught the error before he repeated it multiple times. A few brave ones are privately saying what many are thinking: this could be the beginning of the end for Starmer. They're not saying it publicly yet because moving against the sitting Prime Minister is politically dangerous. But the conversations are happening. The calculations are being made. If Starmer's polling numbers collapse in the wake of this scandal, if Labour starts hemorrhaging support in by-elections and local contests, the pressure to replace him will become irresistible. The opposition is already planning how to maximise the damage. The Conservative Party is going to bring this up at every possible opportunity. Every time Starmer makes a claim about anything, they're going to question whether it's true. Every statistic he cites will be fact-checked in real time. They're going to make, can we trust anything the Prime Minister says? The central question of British politics. And that's a devastating attack line, because once voters start doubting a leader's basic honesty, it's almost impossible to rebuild that trust. Starmer could have the best policies in the world, but if people think he's lying about the data supporting those policies, they won't believe him. Reform UK is taking a different approach. They're using this to argue that the entire political establishment is corrupt, that both Labour and the Conservatives will lie to maintain power, and that only Reform tells voters the truth. It's a populist message that resonates with people who are already disillusioned with mainstream politics, and scandals like this, where a Prime Minister gets caught lying in Parliament, provide perfect evidence for that narrative. Reform doesn't even have to exaggerate or spin. They can just point to what happened at PMQs and say, this is what the establishment does. They lie, they get caught, and they face no consequences. Vote for us if you want accountability. The international reaction is also worth noting. Foreign governments and media outlets are covering this story, and it's damaging Britain's reputation. Allies want to know that the British Prime Minister is reliable, that his word means something, that they can trust what he tells them in diplomatic context. If Starmer can't be trusted to accurately cite his own government's employment statistics, how can he be trusted on matters of international security, trade negotiations, or military commitments? This scandal has implications beyond domestic politics. It affects how Britain is perceived on the world stage, and perception matters enormously in international relations. Legal experts are examining whether Starmer's statements could constitute contempt of Parliament. Deliberately misleading Parliament is technically a criminal offence under parliamentary law, though it's rarely prosecuted. But the fact that legal analysts are even discussing this possibility shows how serious the situation is. If there was credible evidence that Starmer knowingly lied rather than simply being misinformed, there could theoretically be legal consequences beyond just political embarrassment. That's unlikely to happen in practice, but the mere fact that it's being discussed adds another layer of pressure on Starmer to provide a convincing explanation for what happened. The bureaucratic finger-pointing has already begun. Downing Street sources are suggesting that civil servants provided the Prime Minister with incorrect briefing materials. The Office for National Statistics is standing by its published figures and suggesting that if Starmer cited different numbers, that's not their error. Cabinet Office officials are reportedly conducting an urgent review of how briefing materials are prepared and fact-checked before being used by the Prime Minister. Everyone is trying to avoid blame for what's increasingly looking like a catastrophic failure of basic competence, because that's almost worse than deliberate lying. If Starmer's team is so dysfunctional that they can't even get basic statistics right, what does that say about their ability to govern? The next few days will determine whether this scandal destroys Starmer or whether he manages to survive it. His team is working on a response strategy right now. They need to decide whether to issue a formal apology, to blame advisors, or to continue insisting that Starmer did nothing wrong. Each option carries risks. An apology might end the immediate crisis, but would require admitting that he misled Parliament, which creates its own problems. Blaming advisors makes him look weak and out of control of his own office. Continuing to deny that anything improper happened means fighting a battle against documented facts, which is almost impossible to win. There's no good option, which is exactly the position you never want to be in as Prime Minister. Public opinion is already shifting. Polls conducted in the hours since the PMQs incident show Starmer's approval ratings dropping sharply. Voters are saying they trust him less than they did before. Labour's lead over the Conservatives has narrowed. Reform UK has gained support. These are preliminary numbers and they might not hold, but the trend is clear and it's terrible for Labour if this trend continues. If voters decisively turn against Starmer over this scandal, Labour MPs will have to make a choice. Stand by their leader and potentially lose their seats, or remove him and hope a new leader can restore trust. That's not a theoretical choice. That's a decision they might have to make in the coming weeks. What makes this particularly galling for many observers is that Starmer built his political brand on honesty and integrity. He positioned himself as the antidote to Boris Johnson's dishonesty. He promised to restore trust in government after years of Conservative scandals. He said he would run a government where truth mattered and rules were followed. And now he's been caught doing exactly what he condemned his predecessors for doing. The hypocrisy is staggering, and voters notice hypocrisy. They might forgive a politician who never claimed to be honest getting caught in a lie. They're much less forgiving when someone who made honesty their central promise turns out to be just as dishonest as everyone else. The opposition's attack lines are writing themselves. He said he'd be different. He said he'd tell the truth. He was lying about that too. It's brutal, it's effective, and it's based on demonstrable facts. Starmer claimed unemployment was falling. The official data shows it was rising. He was confronted with this discrepancy in Parliament and refused to admit error. Everything else is commentary, but those basic facts are inarguable. And in politics, when your opponents can attack you with inarguable facts, you're in the worst possible position. The Reform UK big MP who exposed Starmer, Lee Anderson, has become an overnight sensation. He's being hailed as a hero by people who are sick of politicians getting away with lying. His social media following has exploded. He's being interviewed by every news outlet. And he's using this platform to hammer home Reform's message that the political establishment is broken and needs to be replaced. Whether you agree with Reform's politics or not, you have to admire the tactical brilliance of what Anderson did. He didn't rant or rave. He simply presented facts, official government facts, and let those facts speak for themselves. It was devastating precisely because it was so calm, so measured, so impossible to dispute. Looking ahead, this scandal will haunt Starmer for the rest of his time in office, however long that is. Every time he stands at the dispatch box, opponents will question whether he's telling the truth. Every statistic he cites will be scrutinised. Every claim will be fact-checked. He's lost the presumption of honesty that leaders need to govern effectively, and regaining that trust, once lost, is incredibly difficult. Some leaders never manage it. They limp on, weakened and diminished, unable to command authority because everyone remembers the lie, the scandal, the moment when they were exposed. The institutional damage goes beyond Starmer personally. Parliament's authority depends on the assumption that what's said in the chamber is true, or at least honestly believed to be true. When prime ministers can cite false statistics without consequence, it degrades the entire institution. It makes parliamentary debate meaningless if nobody can trust the facts being presented. The Speaker should be demanding a full explanation from Starmer about how this happened and what will be done to prevent it happening again. Parliamentary authorities should be investigating whether contempt of Parliament has occurred. If they let this slide, they're admitting that holding power to account is no longer Parliament's function. This moment will be studied in political science classes for years as an example of how quickly a leader's credibility can evaporate. Starmer went into PMQs as Prime Minister with a large majority and, while not popular, at least still commanding basic respect. He came out as a Prime Minister who'd been caught lying on live television and had responded by doubling down rather than admitting error. That's a catastrophic loss of credibility in the space of minutes. And in politics, credibility is everything. Without it, you can't persuade, you can't lead, you can't govern. You're just a placeholder waiting to be replaced by someone the public might actually trust. The final question is whether Starmer can recover from this. History suggests it's possible, but difficult. Politicians have survived scandals before through a combination of shamelessness, short public memory, and lack of viable alternatives. Starmer might calculate that Labour MPs won't remove him because they can't agree on a replacement. He might bet that voters will forget about this when the next crisis comes along. He might simply refuse to resign and dare anyone to make him, but that approach has costs. It means governing from a position of weakness. It means constant challenges to authority. It means every decision being second-guessed because nobody trusts the person making it. That's a miserable way to be Prime Minister, and it's unlikely to lead to effective government or electoral success. Starmer has been caught lying. The evidence is irrefutable. How he responds to this moment will define his premiership and possibly determine when and how it ends. Claudia is AI and can make mistakes. Please double check responses.